So let's start with this kind of synopsis and where we're at here with the Bengals rookies here at this point. Obviously, there were 6 picks for the Bengals in this past year's draft. And we said going into the draft, when you pay Joe Burrow, when you pay T. Higgins, when you pay Jamar Chase, and ultimately later on ended up giving the raise to Trey Hendrickson, didn't give him the long-term deal, but you paid him as well, at least for 1 year. And when that happens, regardless of where you're at in the National Football League, if you're paying 2 receivers, which obviously is, pretty uncommon, I would say, in the NFL, and a lot of pundits were banging on the Bengals saying, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be a recipe for winning. At this point, unfortunately, it looks like they're kind of right? Because you're not winning. Jamar and T are balling. Defense still stinks, right? But the bottom line is when you pay 3 guys like that, top-of-the-line money, and you can throw Hendrickson into the mix there as well with his 1-year raise here for the Bengals, you have to hit on your draft picks. And you only had 6 of them. It's not like you had 9 picks and lots of opportunities. With the 6 picks, you needed to really hit on at least 3 of them. And one you definitely needed to hit on was the first-round pick in Shemar Stewart. And obviously, that hasn't worked out the way we certainly were hoping for at this point for the Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously, you watch the game, you use your eyeballs, and the eyes tell you that it ain't good for Shemar Stewart, right? That him getting pancaked in the Bear game, I mean, the whole point of taking Shemar Stewart is that he's this freaky athlete that's a physical beast and, is going to be able to rush the quarterback and be really physical and be solid in the run game. I mean, the block that guy, I think it was Darnell Wright of the Chicago Bears, put, just full pancake job, blasted him over like 4 gaps over, and knocked out one of his teammates there in the process there as well. And Whitworth was talking about this on his podcast. Like, that is going to be on, Darnell Wright's highlight tape throughout his entire career. Like, that's just a grown man move on a guy that's supposed to be a tough physical beast of a presence for you. And, of course, Shemar Stewart on that obviously has not panned out. But Stewart, he ranks 16th out of 16 qualifying rookie edge rushers in overall PFF grade, 15th in true pass set win percentage, and one of the 2 players without a hit or a sack on a QB this year. And a lot of us, we sat there and you looked at his stats in college and you said, yeah, that was really cool what he did at the combine. He was moving pretty fast. He looks pretty strong. He's kind of a beast, right? But you sat there and you looked at his production in the SEC and you said, what did he do? What do you have, 4.5 sacks throughout his entire college career? How is that going to magically turn into sacks and production and quarterback hits here in the National Football League? Obviously, it did not, or at least through a couple of weeks. Now, there's some people out there that say, give him some time. He had the ankle injury. Maybe that's still something that's bothering him. By the way, he's got the knee right now. He's day-to-day, but there's a lot of people out there that don't anticipate him playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe he's officially been ruled out, but I haven't seen anything about that yet with Shemar Stewart. But the bottom line is you couldn't afford to take somebody that was going to be a bit of a project. And you hear Al Golden talk about him, and he says, the quote was infant stages with Shemar Stewart. You couldn't afford to do that at this point. Your defense was bad last year. You needed a guy to come in and really be a force for you and really be a capable starter and somebody that you could count on. Look at Malachi Starks in Baltimore. He's playing really, really solid. Look at Jahad Campbell in Philadelphia. He's sensational. Both of those guys you could have had. Both of those guys would immediately elevate your defense. We said that. A lot of people said that. Right? Instead, you took the guy that was a project and just hoped that he would turn into a great NFL player immediately. Obviously, that hasn't happened. And you couple it with him not showing up for much of the offseason workouts because he's in a contract dispute, and it's pretty ugly on the playing field for Shemar Stewart. You're holding on to a little bit of hope. I know maybe I'm overreacting a little bit. Obviously, there's some frustration with the fact he hasn't done anything and the fact that he was drama this offseason and, he hasn't always said the right things when he's had a microphone in front of him. I understand that. But, maybe there's hope for him in 2026. But this year here in 2025, I don't think there's really any reason to be optimistic that he can help this team playing winning football. And remember, they were talking about, he's getting a lot of mental reps, right? Remember, he was holding out, and not many people talking about the mental reps now because clearly that didn't do enough, and clearly it's not working on the football field. It's not that, I think the physical stuff, right? He's huge and he's a great athlete. Like, that should work itself out at some point. And that's kind of what Al Golden, I'm sure Zach Taylor is kind of leaning on. But when you couple it with not knowing where you're supposed to go, not trusting what you're seeing, it results in a lot of ugly play. And unfortunately, that's what the Bengals have gotten from Shemar Stewart here. If there's one thing, again, they might be without him for several weeks, But if there's one thing to potentially try with him, and Al Golden's kind of started to do it a little bit more, with Shemar Stewart is kind of just line him up in different spots. Early on, it was basically, yep, we're going to line him up over the tackle, and he's going to rush the passer from the edge. You're starting to see him get moved around a little bit more. I think that could be beneficial for him. And if there's one thing to try here going forward with Shemar Stewart, is just to move him around a little bit more. And you talk about, the season, could it be technically over in a couple of weeks? Yeah, maybe. But when Shemar is ready to come back and be healthy, he's got to be out there, and he's got to be out there for a lot of snaps. Because I'm out on Shemar Stewart, but the Bengals aren't going to be out on him in 2026. They just can't afford to do that. They can't quit on him this early. He's going to be a guy that gets a lot of playing time next year, and for the sake of the Bengals, he has to figure it out, and he has to improve upon what he's doing right now. And then you get to the next level, of course, of the defense, and it's those linebackers. And, linebacker in the NFL, linebacker at any level of football is just such an important position to play. And when you put two rookies out there and then you put them behind a bad defensive line, you're kind of setting them up for failure. And unfortunately, Demetrius Knight, he needed to be a guy similar to Shemar Stewart that came in here and was ready to play immediately. And the Bengals kind of expected him to be that guy. Oh, he's played a ton of college football. He's a mature guy. He was a captain. He's been around. He's married. He's got a kid. We trust this guy out there. And he said all the right things, and he's done all the right things from a work ethic perspective. But is he playing great football? No. And then you pair him with Barrett Carter. Again, he was a fourth-round pick, so you can't really expect as much from him. Right? And again, all the leadership stuff is there. He was a captain at Clemson. He wore the green dot. He says the right things. He's taking accountability. That's all great, and that's stuff you can build off of. But unfortunately, the Bengals need a lot more than that right now. We don't just need him to be a good teammate and a good leader. We need him to be a really, really good player. And unfortunately for him, he doesn't have that guy that he could lean on because his running mate is a fellow rookie. And that's where things get, very, very complicated. And that's when you start to question the Logan Wilson move maybe a little bit. And we'll definitely talk with Gabby about the Logan Wilson trade, right? Because I think now it's like, well, you got these two rookie guys that you're sending out there for the majority of the snaps. Who's going to, coach them up? Logan Wilson's gone. Who can be that veteran presence that they can lean on and ultimately try to get a little bit better? Don't have that with these two guys anymore. And some of the stats kind of jump at you with these two guys. I think at the end of the day, the linebackers are kind of the root of your problems, right? Because linebackers is just such an important position. You're constantly getting in collisions every single play, right? I mean, there's a reason why the linebackers always have the most tackles, right? Because they're always there at the point of attack with an opportunity to make a play. And, you've seen some good stuff from Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, but unfortunately, you haven't seen enough. And that's caused, a lot of issues for you on defense. I think the biggest thing with Demetrius Knight is he's just a little bit too hesitant right now when he's playing, and there's some clips kind of circulating on social media that kind of illustrate that. But in this league, you can't afford to be, a half a step late reacting, right? It's the NFL. They're going to make you pay. And you kind of saw that remember that end around as Zacchaeus in the Chicago Bear game a couple of weeks ago, and he just was a split second late getting to the boundary, and at that point, Zacchaeus is around the corner and he's into the end zone for a touchdown. Can't have that in the NFL. Hopefully, that's something that as he plays more, he can iron that out because, he's made some plays out there defensively. And then Barrett Carter has had some missed tackles, right? There's clips of him where it's like, okay, he's in the right spot, which is good, but then he can't get the guy on the ground. In this league, in the NFL, if your linebackers are missing tackles, you're in deep trouble because then they get to the third level of that defense, and then that's already, 10 yards at that point, and things can get really hairy for you. So if your linebackers are missing tackles, that obviously is a serious, serious issue, and they're missing a ton. These two guys are missing a ton. There are 6 rookie linebackers with at least 300 snaps this year. Only 2 have a missed tackle rate higher than 9.4%, and those 2 linebackers are Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter at 15.3% and 15.4%. Respectively. So, hopefully the hesitancy, they can clean that up a little bit more, play a little bit quicker, and, as they grow, they'll continue to understand how to play the position a little bit better, and you're hoping that they continue to get better as the season goes on, and they can kind of work out some of those kinks as linebackers, because they're going to be guys that you rely on, right, at that linebacker spot with Barrett Carter and, of course, Demetrius Knight Jr. And then we'll talk about the offensive line a little bit there as well. I think those guys, there's some optimism that things are trending in the right direction because you remember at the beginning of the year, obviously everyone was talking about the defense and how bad the defense was, but also it was the offensive line, too, that wasn't necessarily playing at a very high level. Well, that talk has kind of simmered down a little bit, and all of a sudden you got 2 rookies out there playing in Dylan Fairchild and Jalen Rivers, and now you sit there and you go, okay, maybe we can build around these guys. Maybe these guys can be, cornerstones of your offensive line for years going forward. And of course, you have some veterans there that you question. Orlando Brown Jr., what's his future going to look like? He certainly has struggled. And Ted Karras, who we all love, but he's potentially getting a little bit long in the tooth there as well. But I think the offensive line and those 2 picks is something that should intrigue a lot of people going forward. And then the final pick, of course, in the 6th round was Taj Brooks, and we haven't really seen much from him yet because the Bengals, of course, have Chase Brown, and of course, they have Samaje Perine, and he really hasn't been asked to do much. But Perine probably going to miss some time here, and he's going to have an opportunity out of Texas Tech to see what he can do. And we've seen some guys in the back end of that draft at the running back position at other places across the league. Obviously, Kyle Monangai in Chicago, that's had a lot of success to this point, and we're all going to start to find out really what Taj Brooks can offer at that running back spot, and if he potentially can be a guy going forward to be kind of that second back behind Chase Brown.